Everyone tells you that you simply overthink everything, that you should stop taking everything so seriously, that you would feel better if you finally stopped caring what other people think. But what if you've been looking at the wrong problem the entire time? You send someone a message, an hour passes, 2 hours. Suddenly your mind starts working. Did I write something wrong? Was I too pushy? Are they annoyed? Even though nothing has actually happened, entire stories begin to form within just a few minutes. Interestingly, the things that occupy us the most are the ones we don't know for certain. A clear answer ends the overthinking, but uncertainty keeps our brain occupied for hours. That's why an unanswered message or mixed signals can feel far more stressful than a clear rejection. Someone gives you a slightly strange look after a conversation. While everyone else has long moved on with their day, you keep replaying the conversation in your mind. Should I have said that differently? Was that embarrassing? Why did I even bring that up? Almost everyone experiences situations like this. That's why most people believe they simply worry too much or are especially sensitive. But the more closely psychologists studied this behavior, the clearer it became that the real cause often lies somewhere else entirely. Very often, the issue isn't that you think too much. Behind this behavior lies a much older mechanism. Our brain is constantly evaluating how safe our social environment is. Why that becomes clearer and clearer throughout this video. So if the real problem was never that you worry too much, then what is it? You walk into a supermarket and stand in line at the checkout. The person in front of you calmly places their groceries on the conveyor belt. When it's your turn, the cashier barely says a word, scans your items, and wishes you a nice day with a serious expression. On the way back to your car, you suddenly think, "Am I unlikable?" In reality, it's far more likely that she's simply been sitting at the checkout for 6 hours, and you're already the 300th customer she served. It's fascinating how quickly our brain relates everything back to itself. Somewhere inside, there seems to be a little employee whose only job is to say, "This might have something to do with you." And apparently, that employee never clocks out. And that's one of the reasons why we notice rejection much faster than acceptance. Psychologists call this the negativity bias. Our brain pays far more attention to negative signals than positive ones. We often barely notice 10 friendly interactions in a single day, but one critical look or one unfriendly comment can stay with us for hours. There's a good reason for that. For most of human history, people didn't live alone but in groups. Anyone who was permanently excluded from the group had much lower chances of survival. That's why our brain developed an extraordinary sensitivity to anything that might signal rejection or exclusion. It's better to react too cautiously once than to overlook an important warning sign. Very little has changed about that to this day. Even now, belonging still matters to us. Friends, family, and co-workers give us stability and security. The problem is that our brain often doesn't distinguish between real rejection and completely harmless situations. A stressed cashier, a co-worker in a bad mood, or a short reply to a message can suddenly feel like a personal rejection. Even though they have nothing to do with us, our internal alarm system still goes off. Imagine you trip while walking down the street. Nothing dramatic. You catch yourself immediately and keep walking, and yet you suddenly feel as if everyone saw it. For a brief moment, you're convinced that people will remember it for the rest of the day. In a way, it's pretty funny. We walk through the world as if we were the main character in a movie. Our brain seems completely convinced that everyone else is constantly paying attention to us. But in reality, everyone is playing the lead role in their own movie. Psychologists call this the spotlight effect. We massively overestimate how much other people observe and judge our behavior. In reality, most people are busy with their own thoughts. While you're wondering whether your stumble was embarrassing, the person next to you might be thinking about what to cook for dinner tonight, or why they themselves acted so strangely earlier. That thought is incredibly freeing, isn't it? At the same time, we now live in a world that constantly tells us the exact opposite. Likes, followers, status, and outward appearance seem to constantly determine how successful or valuable someone is. So it's no surprise that our brain believes every opinion from other people is incredibly important. And this is where something remarkable happens. The more we believe we're being watched, the more cautiously we behave. We think longer before speaking, express our opinions less spontaneously, and constantly monitor our own behavior. In doing so, we often aren't reacting to reality, but to an audience that mostly exists only inside our own mind. What matters isn't how many people are actually watching us. What matters is the significance our brain gives to their possible judgments. At this point, most people ask themselves the wrong question. They ask, why do I overthink so much? But the more important question is, why does other people's opinion affect me so much in the first place? The answer often isn't that we desperately want everyone to like us. Much more often, we're trying to avoid something else: rejection. At first, that sounds like the same thing, but it's a crucial difference. There's a world of difference between the sentence, "I want everyone to like me," and the sentence, "I absolutely don't want to stand out in a negative way." That's why some people constantly apologize, even though they haven't done anything wrong. They agree with things even when they actually have a different opinion. Or they rewrite a message 5 times before they even press send. Not because they're insecure, but because they want to eliminate every possible chance of being judged negatively. Psychologists refer to this pattern as approval seeking. It's often less about wanting everyone to like us. Instead, our brain tries to predict other people's reactions and avoid every possible negative judgment. The problem is that other people's thoughts can never truly be controlled, and yet many people spend a large part of their lives trying to do exactly that. At the same time, our brain has another peculiar trait. It handles missing information surprisingly poorly. When another person's behavior remains unclear, it creates a kind of mental gap, and our mind immediately tries to fill that gap. The problem is that it rarely says, "I don't know." Instead, it comes up with an explanation that feels as plausible as possible. A brief reply suddenly becomes disinterest, and a serious facial expression suddenly becomes proof that someone is upset because of us. The less information we have, the more room our own interpretation gets. Ironically, these stories often feel remarkably convincing, even though they're frequently based on little more than a guess. Our brain doesn't evaluate whether an explanation is actually true. For a brief moment, it's much more important that an explanation exists at all. Even a false assumption provides more short-term certainty than complete uncertainty. That's why some thoughts become so persistent, even though deep down we know we can't actually verify them. So the problem isn't that you think too much. Thinking is simply the strategy your brain uses to try to prevent rejection. Maybe you're expecting the classic advice now: just stop thinking about it. But advice like that often falls short. As long as the brain believes it can control other people's thoughts, it will keep producing new analyses. So the real problem isn't the thinking itself, but the attempt to control something that is fundamentally beyond our control: other people's thoughts.